Hi, mate, 40 here. So we're about 24 hours away from the big Trump versus Harris debate. But I thought we'd step back and look at things philosophically for a minute. You might have heard of Mencius Moldbug, Curtis Yarvin. All right, so he came up with the term the Cathedral in 2007. So he says that the academy, meaning universities, and the media are really sovereign over our elected government and over society. So my position is that society is way too complicated for any one segment to be sovereign, whether it's the elected government, whether it is government bureaucracy, whether it's the courts, whether it's Congress, the media, big business, big tech, right? Our society is way too complicated. We have to clearly state that any one sector is necessarily sovereign. So I think arguing about, are we a democracy? Are we an autocracy? Are we run by just a tiny few members of big business or the CIA? They're all way too simplified attitudes towards reality, right? We have elements of democracy. We have elements of oligopoly and elements of autocracy and elements of capitalism and elements of socialism that all work together to operate in the United States of America. So Curtis Yarvin used the pen name Mencius Moldbug, and he's well known for founding the Dark Enlightenment. So he says that American democracy is a failed experiment and it should be replaced by an accountable monarchy. Now, are there any examples of this sort of accountable monarchy working in any countries? No. And if American democracy is a failed experiment, how come America is just getting stronger and stronger relative to other countries around the world, including competing great powers of China and Russia? Now, I'll admit the quality of life is declining in the United States. Social trust, social cohesion are declining. But let's take a little closer look here at Curtis Yarvin. And I like Joseph Bronski's critique. He says, my issue with Curtis Yarvin is that his work is totally unscientific. It's just words, mostly stuff that he lifted from old books. Right? This can be explained by being too dumb to do science or being too selfish to bother or too lazy. All right. Curtis Yarvin is a guru. He likes the attention of coming up with attention-grabbing theories. And here's a little taste.
There's a psychologist at the LSE called Satoshi Kanazawa, and he has the Savannah IQ interaction hypothesis. And he says that we have a built-in instinct to be monarchists. And if we are not monarchists, it's an evolutionary mismatch. We'll be very unhappy. What do you think about that?
We are political animals. We have all sorts of political instincts. We have the instincts to be monarchists, and we have the instincts to be rebels. And when you look at, for example, baboon societies or chimp societies, you see that there's a chief chimp. You see that chimps make war, and you also see that chimps revolt against the chief chimp. And they basically, if they can't be chief chimp, they want to tear the chief chimp down, and they develop the same excitement that you see in teenagers who want to tear the world around them down, you see in teenage chimps who want to tear the chief chimp down and bite his balls off. And, you know, all of these instincts are present in a very...
So I have no doubt that Curtis Yarvin would be interesting to have a meal with. He's got a ton of ideas. He's well read. He reminds me a bit of Z-Man and other people who just, he reminds me a little bit of Kevin Michael Grace, people who are just incredibly captivating and charismatic with their ideas. But Curtis Yarvin doesn't pay any attention to empirically backing them up. Right, he's a lot like Richard Spencer. He's a romantic philosopher, romantic in the sense that he sees much more to reality and to his ideas than is what is really there.
Very crude level in the chimpanzee. And indeed, you know, the sort of Margaret Mead pseudo-sociologists who basically created this 20th century, consensus were very disturbed when they found that chimpanzees actually make very, very brutal warfare. And of course, you know, this whole myth of like peaceful, primitive human societies is just, utter nonsense. And such a thing has barely ever existed. And where it exists, actually, like you see, the origins of, for example, hippieism, like hippie societies do spontaneously come to exist in completely non-Western contexts. And I think the best example of this is you may know of this example, Ed, the Maori and the Moriori. Do you know the story? So the Moriori are, the Maori, of course, a very warlike, group of Polynesians who are the first to discover New Zealand. But they have these cousins, the Moriori, who come from the same tribe, the same original sort of root. And the Moriori inhabit these islands that are sort of, Cook Islands or something, near New Zealand. And they somehow form this very peaceful, maybe matriarchal, like it's a society without violence. It's exactly what people want to see in a traditional society. It all happens without any hippie missionaries telling them how to be hippies. It actually happens. And then in the 18th century, a bunch of Maori, who are these like cannibal warlord people, learn about the existence of the Moriori and basically get a European ship and sail to the islands of the Moriori and just like enslave and destroy them utterly brutally. And the Moriori are like totally, like it's against their principles to fight back. And so they're like, children are slaughtered before their own eyes in like this sort of horrible way. It's a really disgusting, horrifying story. And it basically reminds us both that the sort of the hippie impulse is actually very much a universal human impulse, just like the monarchical, impulse, but it's also relatively unstable in a context where people are thinking in the evolutionarily adapted way. And, when you all start behaving like Moriori, your children will be eaten alive before your eyes.
So Moldbug would be a lot more compelling if he would bother to accumulate evidence for his ideas, right? And he explored more this evolutionary argument, right? So we have a good essay here by Joseph Bronski, The Ideological Homogeneity of the Cathedral. He analyzes Moldbug. And so Moldbug claims the cathedral's many institutions, right? It's the media, it's the most prestigious intellectual institutions. There's no central organizational connection, but they behave as if they are a single organizational structure. And Harvard, Yale, the Times, and the Post are on the same page. They were in 1951, and they are again in 2021. And Bronski says, I must point out that Moldbug supplies no evidence for this claim. What if cathedral institutions are not as homogeneous as they appear? Right? In journalism and in the news media in general, the cathedral is not at all homogeneous, right? It's reductive and tautological to just define everything but the New York Times as outside of the cathedral, right? We're playing word games here. So you would hope that these kind of social analyses would be based on math and on data and on evidence. Right? It's not compelling to me to just make up claims from your armchair. This would be my frustration with the Z-Man blog. All right, so Bronski says, my main problem with Moldbug's writings has always been he's not a fan of empirical evidence. So what value does your work then have? All right, it might produce emotional reactions in people that are pleasing, but if you're not concerned about developing evidence, all right, then it's hard to take things seriously, right? And when you look at the real world, there is not the level of uniformity that he portrays in the cathedral, right? And the idea that the academy and the news media is just running everything, well, then how do we elect Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan twice, George W. Bush twice, right? These institutions are overwhelmingly opposed to such personalities. And then the idea that who you elect for president makes absolutely no difference because the cathedral is just running things. Well, we have seen what happens when you get a bunch of conservative chief justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Right? They ruled affirmative action on the basis of race illegal in public institutions, and we have had many public institutions abiding by the new quotas. We haven't had uniform abiding by the new dicta from the Supreme Court, but it is just without any evidence to claim that it makes absolutely no difference who is elected president of the United States. I would say, on the other hand, that for 99% of people, 99% of the time, it doesn't make a significant difference in their life who's elected president. But you can see significant differences in society. They just don't affect most people most of the time. All right, we've got a big debate coming up tomorrow night. Here's some commentary from Hugh Hewitt with John Ellis.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I am glad to have you here because you put out a polls in one place this weekend. And whenever you put out a polls in one place, I want to direct people to political news, political items over at Substack. Tell people what you do when you do a polls in one place.
Well, the idea is that there are, hundreds of polls every week, and what we try to do is find the 10 or 12 polls that we think are most interesting or important for both, and that's sort of the framework of polls in one place. And what's interesting about doing polls in one place this time is that in the U.S. presidential election, the polls are the same every week, so you don't really need to update them because Michigan is close, Wisconsin's close, Pennsylvania is close, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, John, you're a serious guy you were on the decision desk for years. You know how polling can be right or wrong. I am not. I don't know statistics. I never took them. I just take them at face value. But I do wonder whether or not something Pew Research wrote about polling response bias is a real deal for you, because polling response bias, according to Pew, indicates that some segments of the population are in a hurry to talk to pollsters and other segments of the population are not. Do you believe in polling response bias?
I think I do, actually. I think that there's, I thought in 2020 there was a hidden Trump vote. And, the question is whether the pollsters have corrected this problem for 2024. I don't know the answer to that. But I will say this, it is increasingly hard to conduct public opinion surveys. The refusal rate is in the 90th percentile. If you're doing a poll in Iowa, I remember talking to Ann Seltzer, who does the Iowa poll for the Des Moines Register. She does also a lot of national polling. And she was saying that her refusal rates were in the 90 percentile. Not only is there a problem getting it right, there's a problem getting people to actually respond.
Now, John, I hate to bring this up because I work for the Washington Post, so I hate to bring this up, but I like to do so because it illustrates better than anything else. A week before the 2020 election, less than 7 days actually, ABC Washington Post ran a poll that said Joe Biden was 17 points ahead of Donald Trump. In fact, the final count, Joe Biden won Wisconsin by 0.63 point, not 17 points, 0.63 point. I think that was, in effect, voter suppression. I don't think they intended to do it, but how does someone get it that wrong? You were in this business for a long time.
I think if you see a poll, we had in 1988, I was at the NBC News election unit, and with 3 or 4 weeks to go, then Vice President George H.W. Bush was ahead of Mike Dukakis, according to our poll that we've been in the field with, by 17 points. And we had a meeting about it, and we decided to not publish it, not put it on the air because it just was so out of whack with reality. A 95% confidence level can mean that 1 out of every 20 polls is completely wrong. And if you had in Wisconsin a 17-point lead in 2020, at the very end of the campaign, it was obviously wrong. It should have thrown it out.
And so do you expect more discipline or less discipline among pollsters this year? I got asked at a dinner party on Saturday night with my main buddies. We're all around the table. We're celebrating Dr. Denise's wedding. And I got asked, how do they do this? And I have no idea how they do it now. I assume that they are now sending emails to people because you don't want self-selection. That screws up a poll. I don't care what an internet poll says. And if it's a 90% don't answer the phone rate, just actually, what do they do? I'm sympathetic to it.
Yeah, it's landline, mobile, and internet. And the best actually just don't do the screening. They do the interviews. They then get the demographics, and then they match the demographics to the Census Bureau data from the state or from the country. But it's inexact. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about the polls this time is that they all agree, which is usually not the case. But every single poll at the national level, every single poll at the so-called battleground state level is within the margin of error.
And that's what I want people to understand. It's a coin toss, and we don't know. Now, John, I'd like to move over to news items this morning. Every single day, people who follow me on X see one item from news items. They're usually between 12 and 15. John and his team, I don't know what time you get up, John. I get up at 4:45 latest, sometimes 4:30 in the morning to get ready. I don't know how early up you guys are up, but I'm getting drafts of news items early. And today you wrote about Leonard Leo. Now, I don't know Leonard. I've texted with him once. I'm not a member of the Federalist Society. I'm a member of no organized organization that has anything to do with politics for reasons having to do with the news business. But today you have a news item story that Leonard is going to spend, quote, $1 billion to crush liberal dominance across corporate America news. Can he? That's not enough money, is it?
I don't know. The thing that made it newsworthy, and the reason I put it in news items today, is I think that was the first interview that Mr. Leo has given in years, and he gave it to the Financial Times, which was equally interesting. But how much and how he proposes to do that, I don't really understand. I presume that he would choose 6 or 8 companies and go after them, but I don't know how that would work.
$1 billion is not enough. And it's, the dark money number is impossible. I keep looking for news items, but I don't think we'll know until after the FEC gets its quarterly report in after the election. John, would you explain what news items is, where it came from? You've got the...
Okay, let's let's get a burst of the news here from Jesse at Fox.
Picking up quite a lot of nervousness, by the way, on the state of the race. I don't know what you're hearing, Anthony, but I'm getting Democrats kind of texting me.
Yeah, Democrats are nervous. Republicans, they're not nervous, concerned, but not nervous.
A long call yesterday with a strategist, and I can fill you in on that a bit more. But
right, you know what no, you don't know what Donald Trump is going to bring. Right, Donald Trump's incredibly unpredictable.
I'm hearing quite a lot of nervousness from some Democrats.
Debate camp must not be going well because now they're setting expectations really low.
She's never been in a presidential debate before. She's been in a vice presidential debate, but never a presidential debate. So I do think she is going to probably be a little bit more nervous. I think she has more riding on it.
Whatever happened to Mrs. Say It to My Face? She's been at debate camp for a week, rehearsing zingers and watching old game tape.
She has closely studied the former president's past 6 debate performances. She's also been sort of entrenched in these briefing papers going over the former president's past comments, as well as the ways that he has insulted her, so she can be prepared to respond to that. She's engaged in these mock debates with a stand-in for the former president, and she's had conversations with Hillary Clinton and President Biden, who both extensively have knowledge of debating the former president.
Kamala is so nervous she's watched all of Trump's debates, memorized his insults, and is now calling Hillary for help. But the ghost of Joe Biden still haunts her. Behind the scenes, Harris says she feels handcuffed by the debate rules that Biden set. They wanted to create a moment when Trump interrupted her, but now they're rewriting their playbook. They've even turned her hotel room into a movie set with TV lighting and method actors. A Hillary loyalist is not just playing Donald Trump, but inhabiting him, wearing a boxy suit and a long tie. Kamala's even practicing the handshake, if there even is one. Insiders say don't expect substance out of Kamala tomorrow night. Her plan is to tap dance around the Biden record, embrace the good stuff, and distance herself from the bad. Good luck. Her campaign knows she's walking into a trap, so she's going to ignore policy and instead focus on honing in on how to needle Trump and rattle him. They're workshopping poll-tested attack lines that their media allies will make go viral, where Harris could turn to the camera and say, for those who can't hear it, Donald Trump is trying to yell over me. How many of you have been in a meeting where you get talked over? Her entire strategy is dependent on Trump losing his cool. But Trump only loses his cool when you call him a bad golfer or a bad businessman. He's been telling advisors, I'm not going to let her do to me what she did to Mike Pence. Kamala's a cold calculator and has landed some nasty shots in past debates. In 2003, she ran against 2 men for DA, and after they played the Willie Brown card, she said, well, you got popped at a massage parlor, and you're a deadbeat dad who doesn't pay child support. Boom, Harris became DA. We saw her grill Kavanaugh and Jeff Sessions, and we'll never forget what she did to Biden. Called him a racist to his face. But she's also had blow-ups. Tulsi Gabbard annihilated her, and Lester Holt, whether he meant to or not, left her stammering and cackling. Democrats are worrying Trump's going to make Harris look small.
It will take almost superhuman focus and discipline to deal with Donald Trump in a debate. It's no ordinary proposition. Not because Donald Trump is a master of explaining policy ideas and how they're going to make people better off. It's because he's a master of taking any form or format that is on television and turning it into a show that is all about him.
Trump's playing the expectation game, too. No boxes or artificial lifts will be allowed to stand on during my upcoming debate with comrade Kamala Harris. We had this out previously with former NYC Mayor Michael Bloomberg when he was in a debate, and he was not allowed to lift. It would be a form of cheating. And the Democrats cheat enough. You are who you are, it was determined. Over the weekend at a rally in Wisconsin, Trump previewing what he'll be zeroing in on. Listen.
We're run by stupid people. Stupid, stupid people. And we found that out at the debate with Joe. How did that work out? And we're going to find it out again on Tuesday night. Is anybody going to be watching? You know, she's a threat to democracy. They always say, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. I'm not a threat. I'm the opposite. I'm keeping democracy what they are. She's a defunder of police.
Since Kamala came out of nowhere, the American...
Okay, let's get some pre-debate commentary here from Mark Halperin, talking on his panel right now live.
One thing the campaigns do right before debate sometimes is they put out opposition research. And they do that so that the press is talking about it and increase the chances that the topic of the oppo will be raised in the debate. All right, so now I consider this a turtle on the fence post. This guy, K-Files, who works for CNN, who my rough back of the envelope is about 80% of his work is negative on Republicans. But lo and behold, on the eve of the debate, here, let's put this up now for everybody to see, he pops this story. This is like written in like a Mar-a-Lago lab. Harris filled out a questionnaire for the ACLU in 2019 that she supports funding, the cut funding for ICE and gender transition surgery for migrants. All right, again, you couldn't make up a headline like that that'd be better on the eve of the debate to see if you could convince the ABC moderators to ask about this. So one thing I want to say is, and I've been saying this forever, do not think that everything there is to know about Vice President Harris is known. I don't care what job you've had.
This is a key point. Right. Kamala Harris has never been thoroughly vetted.
Senator, attorney general, governor of a big state, vice president. There's more coming if you run for president. There just is. And that's one thing I don't think we knew about the ACLU questionnaire, even though, according to CNN, it's been on the website. So, Brett, you've prepared people and you've been in the room the day before, the morning of, or one last little pepper session, and some propeller head walks in with a printout or an iPad and says, uh-oh, CNN has this. What happens?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to... but I can't imagine that something like this is not something that they're, pretty prepared for.
I'll answer your question, though. I would drop this.
Yeah.
The ideal time to drop it for a 9 o'clock debate is noon.
Yeah.
It's
all right. Brett says
interview and one debate than any other candidate.
That's a good one,
in
too.
human history.
Good. It's pretty good. Also good. Also good. All right, Dan, you need the line or you got it answered?
No, I'll try. For entertainment purposes, the man who talked about,
than most women I know, don't you?
Okay, this is Mark Halperin previewing a likely line from Kamala Harris.
Everybody ready? This will either be the best part of this episode or a total bomb, but let's give it a try because I love this line. Ready? All right, here we go. I'm Kamala Harris. Trish, you're Donald Trump. Trish. Ready? Here we go. There you go. Donald, you look lovely tonight, but that's no surprise. You do spend more time on your hair and makeup than most women I know, don't you?
Kamala, you need to spend more time at the border. You've let 10 to 15 million people illegally enter this country. Where have you been?
Boom. Fred. That's what I hear.
With Trump, they say let Trump be Trump. If you're going to tell him no, he's probably not going to go through with that based on what I've heard from his former advisors and current advisors. That all being said, I think that they have to make it, his idea or present an alternative to what that potentially horrific idea might be. But it has to be his idea.
Fred and I have a little story on this one.
Kamala Harris.
But if you're talking to Kamala Harris, I think you are putting forward, hey, the reason why you're in this race and you're plus 6 points since you have jumped in this race is because you've been very disciplined and you have not taken the bait. And I think
because you get to try out answers, you get to see how they're received by the press.
This is key. All right, Kamala is handicapped because she hasn't done hardly any interviews.
Having tonight is the campaign didn't have the confidence in me to do many interviews. And maybe they don't think I'm very good, and maybe I'm not very good. So I really think that's been a giant mistake on their part, because just as much as being in a hotel room doing debate prep is helpful, doing interviews is very helpful for debate prep because you get to try out answers. You get to see how they're received by the press. You get to try out you can kind of head fake on your moments and stuff like that. And I just think that's been, I think that's been a giant mistake on their part. I think that puts so much pressure on her for tomorrow night.
Brett, I agree with Brett that they allowed it to become a story that it didn't need to become. I'm not sure if that's in Kamala Harris's head right now. Here's what I will say. Donald Trump is more known to the public. So there is a lower variance of what people are going to take away from the debate tomorrow. Kamala Harris, I think there's a higher ceiling, but there is also a higher opportunity for things to crater. I happen to think she won't, but there's a higher boom bust potential because more people are learning about her.
Yeah. All right, last question for me, and I'm going to open it up for everybody. So to me, one of the most valuable things a staffer can do is figure out the questions, right? A lot easier to do debate prep if you know what's going to be asked. Raise your hand amongst the 5 of you. Raise your hand if you think there's the slightest chance that the Harris campaign has been given or somehow gotten the questions, which is I hear all the time from Republicans. All right, Fred, you think yes. Fred, why do you think that?
Well, with the exception of you, Mark, the press is a little leaning in that direction, and there have been many.
Right. What do you think of the chances that Kamala Harris has already been given the debate questions?
Okay. All right. So Fred thinks that. Now, you can't say immigration. You can't say China. You can't say inflation.
One last thing. And I read something the other day that 1 in 3 Americans know someone who has died of an overdose. So, I mean, that's astonishing to me. And so,
Bill, are you from New York State or
She's at the spice store. It's the barbecue. It's just like, I don't care about the food. It's
Spice
just-
store. All right, Bill, I'll meet you at Tavern on the Green in about 25 minutes. Thank you, man. All right, Marcus, welcome in. Tell people who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind, please.
Hey guys, I'm very nervous about tomorrow. I just I kind of watch these things thinking like, what would the average uncommitted voter be looking for? And I'm really nervous. I definitely
Marcus,
don't.
if you were Marcus, if
Back to you liking her. Do you think she had just a minimal role to play in Biden's administration? I mean, there's obviously, if the economy is the big issue.
Were better for me in the Donald Trump years. And that's what they're focusing on. My answer to that is COVID blew everything up. You cannot go back. Not
the Trump era. And I think that's a thing that Harris has actually been doing a really good job of not focusing on the sublime.
Right. Kamala Harris is trying to say we're still living in the Trump era, even though her team has been in the White House. So many pundits say it's really important to come across as the change candidate.
You know, it was like historically bad. I don't quite think he'll go there again, but there's pressure on both of them. No doubt.
I completely agree with Dan. Harris is going to try to prosecute Trump the man, Trump's character, but Trump needs to prosecute her record. What has she done for the last 4 years? Can she stick by what she said in 2019 and 2020 when she was running for re-election? Can she actually describe why she evolved on the litany of issues when in the CNN interview, we kind of addressed this earlier, but she kind of squandered that opportunity to say, oh, I evolved because of the data, or I have more information. Instead, she kind of let Dana Bash, the interviewer, answer that question for her and say, oh, you evolved because when it came off to the American people, or a number of us, I am a Republican, so it definitely came off to me that it just looked like it was political opportunity. And she was saying whatever she needed to get elected, which is what Bernie Sanders said over the weekend on Meet the Press.
Yeah, and I just, as a Democrat, I'll say, you know, because I hear this from family, others, like, how could people vote for Trump? Don't underestimate how much Trump has moved the national conversation, you know, on immigration, against the wars, in terms of kind of how we view the economy. I mean, he deserves credit for moving. I mean, Democrats have moved dramatically more towards him on a lot of these issues. And when he advocated that stuff in 2015, I mean, everyone, Rupert Murdoch, Jeb Bush, everyone was against him. So, I mean, I can understand why people see him as this authentic warrior who just battles for us all day long when everyone has always said he is wrong. And now look kind of where everybody is. One can agree or disagree, but you know, I respect it.
Sue, thank you. All right, now I want to introduce Trisha and Joel, who don't know, Chris and Courtney.
Oh, Lord.
Courtney, you're in Georgia, right?
Correct.
And Chris, you're in Georgia too.
If she doesn't, but I'm feeling pretty optimistic because I think
Chris, where are you gonna watch? Building support, because according to one of our top Georgia correspondents, Courtney,
yes.
Kennedy mania, people's desire for better food and nutrition for kids, is turning this thing quietly against your candidate.
No, those three people don't move me at all, and I don't think they move.
To be alone, I don't want any distractions.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be my dog.
So I shouldn't text you during the debate.
I'll be a nervous wreck. I'll be a nervous.
Okay, I'll leave you alone. Carolina. Some in the Harris camp think North Carolina is a better state than Pennsylvania. So it's definitely one to watch, and we'll get more folks from North Carolina on. Courtney and Chris, good luck tomorrow night with your respective candidates. And for everybody, and again, thank you all for joining. Prediction of the headline, like the USA Today semi-unbiased headline coming out of the debate. All right, just a wild guess. What's the headline, Brett?
From USA Today, that headline is Kamala Harris unveils policies, holds her own against Donald Trump.
Holds her own was my headline.
Holds her own. All right, Dan. Yeah. Okay, Dan.
Kamala and Trump get nasty. Just simple.
Okay. Yep. Joel.
Yeah. Trump-Harris trade attacks tread water in first and maybe only debate.
Okay, Trisha.
I think it'll be Trump spreads falsehood. Kamala, I think, holds her own again. But I do think it's going to be anticlimactic, is what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I go with anticlimactic too. My headline would be Harris to Trump. You spend more time in your hair and makeup than most women I know. I think it'll be anticlimactic, except for that one line.
Okay. Interesting long investigation in the New York Times about this bloke who's all about fighting sex trafficking. All right. He's the basis for the hit movie Sound of Freedom. But shocking, it turns out that this pursuit of rescuing the children and saving them from sex trafficking, it was kind of a cover for his own sexual explorations. The New York Times headline.
To the world, he is an anti-trafficking hero. Women tell a different story. This article is by Mike Baker and read by an automated voice. Tim Ballard had fashioned himself into a made-for-Hollywood hero. For years, he led a nonprofit that proclaimed daring undercover missions to rescue children from the horrors of international sex trafficking. Politicians embraced his call for more barriers on the southern border to block smuggling. President Donald J. Trump brought him on as an advisor. Last year, the hit movie Sound of Freedom showcased his life and work, making more than $250 million and becoming one of the most successful independent films of all time. But while the world knew him as a champion of the vulnerable, many of the women he worked with now tell a much darker story. That Mr. Ballard himself was grooming, manipulating, harassing, and sexually assaulting women. In lawsuits beginning last year, the women said that Mr. Ballard preyed on their desire to help trafficking victims, coercing or forcing them into sexual encounters as part of their undercover work in brothels, strip clubs, and massage parlors. A former Homeland Security agent.
So basically, men will do anything they can to get laid and to look as though they're doing something virtuous, all right? We're all wired to try to appear virtuous, all right? Animals are constantly signaling. People are constantly signaling too. And morality is contagious, right? Health is contagious. If I talk to you about my pull-up routine, that is going to predispose you to be more likely to develop your own pull-up routine. If I talk to you about the volunteering that I do, that will predispose you to thinking about, should I be doing more volunteering? If I talk to you about how it's an important moral value to me to pay my taxes honestly, all right, that will predispose you to consider maybe I should be more rigorous and more moral and more upstanding, more honest with regard to my taxes. So morality is contagious. That's why it's so important to use good discretion with the people that we allow into our life. And we're always trying to signal that we're virtuous so that we can preserve and build our status and our standing with the people most important to us. But if you're a bloke, you recognize how men will frequently use any excuse, all right, to get laid and to get their jollies. And this bloke, he was constantly pumping sex workers, all right, all in the guise of trying to save the effing children, as he puts it.
Mr. Ballard had built his nonprofit, Operation Underground Railroad, at a time when the issue of child sex trafficking was already on the rise. High-profile cases, some of them appallingly real, some of them inventions of conspiracy theorists, drove outrage about minors being forced into sexual servitude and exploited by...
So I had a friend, not a close friend. Wait, his name was Hoffman. It'll come back to me. And he was an investigative journalist. He wrote a book about the 1994 Oklahoma City bombing that killed about 160 people. Like me, he'd had chronic fatigue syndrome throughout his adult life. And he determined, I met him in circa 2002, 2003, he determined that he was going to move to Eastern Europe to fight sex trafficking. And at the same time, he was also hoping to have sex with a lot of women. And so people are complicated, right? People have desires that run all over the place. He was just more honest than most people. Most men will risk everything for an opportunity to have sex with an attractive young woman. And men will take up all sorts of causes, all right, to embrace something that is high status that will enable them to have sex with more pretty young women.
U.S. elites. Mr. Ballard won credibility across the varied worlds of religion, law enforcement, media, politics, and entertainment. By 2020, Operation Underground Railroad was raising nearly $50 million a year in donations, with a roster of supporters that included the conservative media mogul Glenn Beck, the motivational speaker Tony Robbins, and the Pittsburgh Steelers coach Mike Tomlin. In Utah, where the organization's leadership...
And the reason they were able to raise so much money is because they had a simple message. Just like Ben Shapiro and many right-wing media operations are able to raise so much money because they have a simple message. In reality, sex trafficking is what people in desperate circumstances think is the best thing that they can do to survive. So usually most people, if they have a choice between starving to death, all right, not getting badly needed medical attention, right, not taking care of some agonizing dental problem, and selling their daughter or participating in some sex trafficking, will often go for the sex trafficking. So it's the vicious circumstances that people are living in that predispose them to either push their daughter into sex trafficking or to engage in it themselves. And so founding an organization to stop sex trafficking, all right, it's a simple message that's going to bring in a ton of money, but will it do good? Right? It will feel good to give money to this organization. It will feel good to work with this organization. But I mean, how stupid do you have to be a woman who signs off on being part of a couple with this guy, Tim Ballard, and going into all these hypersexual situations and thinking that he's going to treat you very respectfully.
Is based, Mr. Ballard talked up his close connections to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, at times appearing alongside one of the church's 12 power.
Well, when I moved to Los Angeles in 1994, half the women that I was sleeping with, I met in synagogues. So people use religion, ethnic organizations, science, people use anything to get laid. And my friend Kathy Seib had a smart observation about me. Yeah, Luke is a womanizer, but he's a very lazy womanizer. And I would always have a sense from my 20s onward how much effort I'd have to go to get a woman into bed. And invariably, I would choose women who would not require that much effort. And I would embody for them something that they were working on. Often their own father was a sex addict, and they were working through the issues that came with having a father who was a sex addict. I was a sex addict. And if there are 100 people in the room, we'd find each other fairly quickly. And so the women who would choose to participate in this scam, all right, they weren't just naive young babes who were taken advantage of. These are grown-ass women. And how could they be this unbelievably stupid? Well, they were working out of their own psychosexual history and drama. We all have erotic templates in our mind. We all have a love map in our mind that's usually formed in early childhood. They were working out their own trauma by hooking up with this predator.
Full apostles. As concerns about his conduct began percolating last year, the empire he created appeared to be crumbling. In June 2023, he stepped down from Operation Underground Railroad. The Latter-day Saints Church last September denounced Mr. Ballard's morally unacceptable activities in a statement to Vice News, which had published a series of stories raising questions about the nonprofit's operations. And yet, in many conservative circles, Mr. Ballard's star keeps rising.
All right, this guy's an international superhero for fighting sex trafficking. All right, but this whole sex trafficking undercover rescue operation is basically a grim ruse designed to help him and possibly others, get sexual access to women and possibly children. Right? People will tell you what their dark side is. Right? You just have to pay a little attention.
Conservative Political Action Conference in February, Mr. Ballard was on stage arguing that failure to manage the southern U.S. border has turned federal agencies into a child sex trafficking delivery service. He received a Heroic Patriot Award at a Catholic Prayer for Trump event at Mar-a-Lago in March. And in July, Mr. Trump's former lawyer, Rudolph W. Giuliani, hosted Mr. Ballard on his broadcast from the Republican National Convention, encouraging him not to be discouraged and assuring him that he had many allies and a promising future. But questions about Mr. Ballard's conduct at Operation Underground Railroad have continued, and more women have come forward. The New York Times interviewed 10 who worked with Mr. Ballard at the organization, and now described their time there as a nightmare of sexual harassment, coerced sexual contact, and sexual assault.
Yeah, but how did they come to be placed in that situation? All right, women with self-respect would not have placed themselves in that situation. All right, you just get a sense in life who you need to be careful with and who you can just abuse. I've only had one girlfriend in my life who I yelled at on a regular basis, and it embarrasses me, but there was something about my relationship with Christine in I think 2007, 2008, that I just got away with verbal abuse like that. And it would just snowball. And it was awful. But it didn't just come from me, because it's not a problem that I've had in previous relationships, right? It's a problem that came out of that one particular relationship, right? There was something about her that would enable this kind of abuse.
Many had long ties to the Latter-day Saints and said in lawsuits and interviews that they initially trusted Mr. Ballard because of his broad acclaim and the support.
There's absolutely nothing about being a religious person that you should inherently trust. But people will seize on that as an excuse to stop exercising appropriate amounts of caution. Right? Religious people are just as likely to cheat you and to misuse you and to abuse you as non-religious people.
He had received from the church leadership, and they believed deeply in the cause of saving children. In interviews and legal papers, the women described similar scenarios. Mr. Ballard recruited them to act as his romantic partner in undercover operations in which...
Right, you get to act as his undercover partner, his romantic partner in undercover operations. And you're surprised that he then would take advantage of that to pump you? Right? How willfully naive do you have to be? So how on earth do we predict human behavior?
Predicting human behavior. One of them is conscious pattern recognition. Another is intuition or unconscious pattern recognition or precognition. And another one is a specific type of empathy and perspective taking. Starting with conscious pattern recognition. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Certainly people are capable of change, but they have to want to and they have to put in the work. And for the most part, you can't really operate under the assumption that someone has massively changed as a person since the last time you interacted with them. Now, it's possible that my background in psychology gives me a leg up on this, but often I find that all that really takes to predict a person's behavior is to just sit down and write down, what do I predict this person's going to do? Most of the times you already know the answer within yourself. Let me read for a second from this book, The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker, which is a wonderful book. I read it a few months ago, but it's all about the ways in which our intuition can keep us safe from people who would do us harm. And he says, when interviewing victims of anonymous threats, I don't ask who do you think sent you these threats, because most victims can't imagine that anyone they know sent the threats. I ask instead who could have sent them, and together we make a list of everyone who had the ability without regard to motive. Then I ask clients to assign a motive, even a ridiculous one, to each person on the list. Even people who professionally do this for behavior, who work on predicting human behavior when it comes to another person's safety. It's literally that simple. You already know what this person is going to do. You already have the capability of putting yourself in somebody's shoes and getting a sense for what they might try or what they might have tried. Of course, this takes being attentive to people's patterns. So for instance, if you're dealing with somebody who you're in the dark about who they are as a person, you might really struggle to predict their behavior because you ultimately are not paying attention to who they're telling you that they are. So that's the first component, conscious pattern recognition. The second component is unconscious pattern recognition, what is sometimes called intuition or precognition. Intuition might sound like a magical word, like it's just divine intervention, but the way that I'm using it in today.
Good people, meaning people who are good for you, will make you consistently feel good. All right, bad people will make you feel bad. All right, if your stomach starts tightening, your back starts hurting around someone. All right, if you feel icky, right, that's someone who is not good for you.
Today's context is just referring to patterns that you've picked up on unconsciously or preconsciously. Patterns you've noticed, but not on a conscious level, but rather a deeper level, something that maybe you haven't put into words yet or you haven't quite realized, but your body has realized, your unconscious has realized for you. For example, in the beginning of this book, Gavin de Becker gives a really intense example that I don't think
The Gift of Fear is a great book.
I can give on this channel. If you want to read his full book, it's on my Amazon storefront. But anyway, in the example, he's talking about how a woman evaded being unalived by somebody and how she knew to predict how he was going to behave, even though obviously she didn't know this person very well. And then when they were tracing back the steps after the fact, Gavin de Becker helped her realize that there were certain cues that this man had given her that suggested what he was going to do, that she wasn't consciously aware of, but unconsciously her body already knew exactly what it needed to do. That is intuition. That is precognition. That is noticing patterns on an unconscious level and letting your body keep you safe. There's a reason why intelligence agencies have put a lot of research into precognition, because they know there's a lot of value in it. It's not going away because it's there for a reason. It's there to keep us safe. So why not use it to our advantage? And the third element of predicting a person's behavior is perspective taking or empathy. You need to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes to accurately predict what they're going to do. Now look, empathy is not...
Okay, Elliott, Blatt, and Curious Gazelle had a long space Saturday night, and Curious Gazelle sends me a link.
I can't really remember what exactly I was listening to, but I do. It was just very random, some like old man speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so
He's a bit of a curmudgeon.
Yeah, I was just watching.
Okay, this is a discussion. Apparently, that was a discussion about Kevin.
Okay, yes,
No
okay.
worries. Yeah. Okay.
So-
yeah, Luke Ford. I was arguing that I think my appearances on Luke Ford have not really been interesting. I kind of dragged on the conversation too much. And you were going to perhaps offer a counterpoint or maybe build on that. So go ahead.
Well, okay, just from my, my conversation with Luke, I think he does. Anytime he shows up, when you show up in the chat, and if he calls out to you, that means that he enjoyed the conversation. So if he were truly bored, he would probably not call out to you. So
I think he's just being polite because I'm a woman, and I think he thinks that a
No.
woman
She's
is interesting
not-
company.
No, trust me. I mean, he has a lot of boring guests, and he just doesn't call out to them, right? So,
So Elliott Blatt is really good at some things. Like he's very intuitive. He's pretty sharp. He has a way above average amount of empathy. He's got charisma.
but you should come in. You should do like a little bit of preparation, just so that you really state clearly, both for Luke's sake and for the audience's sake, is that you're here to introduce a new idea, right? And that's, you just clearly articulate the new idea that you're introducing, and then support it. But
Yeah, because I've done that in Luke Ford spaces. So we've sort of entertained the idea of talking about analogy in the Quran and the Torah and just different religions, like just exploring the concept of analogy in religions and also rhetoric. But we just didn't get around to doing that. Like we kind of did it, but I was not prepared. I didn't have like the Quranic verses or the biblical verses. I didn't have anything, and I'm just so yeah. Therefore, it was just rubbish. And then I said to him, "Well, we will eventually do this," and we never got around to doing it. But it's still kind of in my brain.
Yeah, overwhelmingly, the more preparation you do, the better the show. But it's not one-to-one, right? Some of my better shows have been with very little preparation and very little sleep. Generally speaking, the more sleep you've had, all right, the more vital and strong you feel, right, the sharper your mind will be and the better the show.
well, yeah, but have a few concrete examples like written out, and so you could, discuss something very pointed and concrete, like this verse means this compared to that verse, and really ground the conversation in a specific example.
What has been your favorite appearance on Luke Ford of your own appearances?
Oh, I don't know. I did when I was sort of making fun of Colin Liddell.
Right.
Well, I got in a small tiff with Colin Liddell over Twitter, and then I sort of recounted. It was about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and I sort of recount. So Colin's one of Luke's favorite guests. You notice that Luke lights up when Colin's in the chat. Like he always like to have come on, and Colin was always a frequent guest on Luke's show, like almost on a daily basis in the old days with KMG. So I've never heard it, but Colin got furious.
Right, you can't think a thought or have an emotion, right, without it rippling through your muscles, including your facial muscles. So if you pay attention, you can often get a pretty good sense of what's going on with someone.
Argument with KMG. Did you ever hear? I gotta find that stream for you.
I don't know who KMG is.
Oh, Kevin Michael Grace.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
So, did you ever listen during that period?
I did, but I can't really remember what exactly I was listening to. But I do. It was just very random, some like old man speaking.
Yeah.
He's
a bit of a curmudgeon.
I was just watching I was watching an old curmudgeon sort of white nationalist talking to a convert to Judaism and used to be a porn journalist. That's how I was reading it.
Yeah,
back then.
they had very strong personalities, and they didn't necessarily gel or complement one each other. So they eventually grew apart.
Right.
And I was on like a little off-label stream we were talking about Luke's show, and I had mentioned that Luke seemed very uncomfortable because Luke claims that he overheard this stream, and I was the impetus for them breaking up.
Okay, fascinating.
Yeah, it crystallized what I was thinking and feeling and struggling with, and then that Elliott Blatt had seen it, and then he just summed it up in such a pithy and exact manner. I realized, okay, I've got to go a different path.
Yeah, I mean, this show there was like 100+ people listening to that, at its peak. It was a pretty big show for an internet term, right? So I felt like I had like a small hand in something kind of tragic. But the truth is Kevin would kind of, he could be a bit of a windbag sometimes. And he would only sort of, he really liked discussing headlines and politics, and like hour upon hour. And that, I can only take about an hour of that stuff before I really just kind of numb out and stop caring. But Kevin could.
All right, this show was best when it was wide open and we'd have spaces with 4, 6, 8, 10 people going back and forth. But then people wised up and realized that appearing on live streams was not in their best interests. And then the realm for what you could talk about publicly, not just on YouTube, but throughout social media and also in society, considerably narrowed after people in the distant right started going out and murdering people, right? That had a considerable inhibiting effect on the kind of wide open discussion that would attract so many people to jump on a live stream. So by early 2019, all right, those days were pretty much over, where it was easy to get 4, 6, 8, 10 smart people jumping on my stream.
Really grind on with it. And
what sort of topics did Kevin like to speak about, though? Do you think that topically they were at odds, or just almost like
which is a matter of emphasis.
methodology?
So Luke likes politics, but he likes to really interweave the psychological aspect to politics.
So to the best of my knowledge, we didn't really clash over topics. It wasn't working between the two of us. And this isn't because Kevin Michael Grace is the bad guy and I'm some wonderful human being coming down from heaven to shed light and love. All right. It's just a very intense thing to do a stream together. And we worked together for almost 2 years, and it ran its course.
Politics. He tries to contextualize politics in terms of individual psychology, right? Whereas KMG likes to sort of discuss politics as they unfold and just analyze them at face value, right? And in terms of just sort of knowable, obvious political motives, right? So, which is, has its place, but after a while, it just starts to seem like a current event show. And that's not where Luke, that's not where he naturally lives. So there has to be an aspect of the psychological, I think, for Luke to be engaged. Or it has to involve something that's just an uncomfortable truth. I don't know if you heard that stream of when I talked to him, but Luke is very comfortable with uncomfortable topics. He likes to go into places that are a bit, that people like to sweep under the rug a bit, topics like betrayal and things like that, things that are intrinsically painful. And I think he puts off a number of people by doing that because he, when you sort of force people to think about uncomfortable things, they tend to drop away.
Right. So did Kevin Michael Grace not like that?
No, he did not like that at all.
Oh, he's quite the prude then.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get a quick hit of the news.
And with stealing a U.S. citizen's ID and voting in the last 2 presidential elections. How'd that happen? I thought illegals aren't allowed to vote. National correspondent Bill Malugin has the story. Bill.
Okay. Well, Jesse, non-citizen voting has really become a polarizing topic.
Law enforcement officials on horses. I was outraged by it.
Why would you be outraged by law enforcement officials on horses? How is that any worse than being on a motorcycle or in a car or in a tank?
It's horrible and deeply troubling. As we all know, it also evoked images of some of the worst moments of our history where that kind of behavior has been used against the indigenous people of our country, has been used against African Americans during times of slavery.
And the whip hoax was born. But it wasn't just a hoax, it was Kamala's Trojan horse, manufactured to justify importing hundreds of thousands of Haitians.
Okay, I got a simple question. Is the United States better for the presence of over 300,000 Haitian immigrants? Right? On what basis would you argue it's better? Because the mere presence of this increased diversity reduces social cohesion and social trust. Why isn't anyone making the case for why America is better for this influx of Haitian immigrants? And I don't think it's inevitable that Haitians will reproduce the conditions that they created in Haiti. All right. I think that is a moderate argument that people will, generally speaking, reproduce the conditions of the place that they come from. But it's not a 100% argument, because in different conditions, people will manifest themselves differently, just as many genes will manifest differently in a different context. So I am wide open to the argument that 300,000 Haitian immigrants make America better. I'm just curious, why doesn't anyone make that argument? Why aren't they assembling evidence for how bringing 320,000 Haitian immigrants into the U.S. is making the country stronger?
Into the country with little vetting.
That is why, also, starting with our administration, we gave TPS, temporary protected status, to Haitian migrants, 55,000. And then more recently, we extended temporary protected status to over 100,000 Haitian migrants for that very reason, that they need support, they need protection.
Fast forward 3 years, and more than 300,000 Haitians are living here legally, thanks to Harris Biden. How's that working out? Let's go to Springfield, Ohio, the new epicenter of Kamala's Middle America migrant crisis. In 2020, Springfield had a population of 60,000. Over the next 4 years, 20,000 newcomers showed up. Now a quarter of the town's Haitian. And the people of Springfield aren't happy.
I'm angry that my friends and family are packing up and moving away. I'm angry that foreigners are using up the resources that were set up for the Americans that reside here. I'm angry that another country's flag was being flown in our city. I'm angry when I see our businesses and recreational areas littered with garbage left by people that do not know or understand our laws and culture and are making no attempt to learn about them. And let me be clear, this is not about race. This is about people being given the privilege of coming here from another country and having no respect for our people, our land, or our life's work.
Americans feel unprotected and unsafe.
I have men that cannot speak English in my front yard screaming at me, throwing mattresses in my front yard. Look at me, I weigh 95 pounds. I couldn't defend myself if I had to. My husband is elderly. I don't understand what you expect of us as citizens. I mean, I understand they're here under temporary protected status and you're protecting them, and I understand that our city services are overwhelmed and understaffed. But who's protecting us? If we're protecting them, who's protecting me? I want out of this town. I am sorry. Please give me a reason to stay.
People in Springfield say driving around town's now dangerous.
I really challenge you guys to get out here and do something. These Haitians are running into trash cans. They're running into buildings. They're running into... they flipping cars in the middle of the street. And I don't know how, like, y'all can be comfortable with this. Like, I don't know, like, who's getting paid from it. I honestly feel like someone's getting paid from it in the background.
Last year, a Haitian migrant in Springfield drove a minivan down the wrong side of the highway. A school bus swerved out of the way and crashed, killing an 11-year-old student on board. Not only is Biden-Harris...
Wait, I'm looking at the New York Times, guys, and it says, by most accounts, the Haitian immigrant community has helped revitalize Springfield, though it has put pressure on housing, schools, and hospitals.
Made this country more dangerous. They've made it more expensive.
Got off the phone with the insurance company and was told that my insurance went up because of the cost of doing business in my area. Me and my wife have good driving records. No accidents, and she's never had an accident. So I live in Springfield, Ohio, where the influx of Haitians are, and we have had an enormous amount of car accidents because they don't know how to drive. We got to do something about it. 1/3 of our population is now Haitian immigrants, undocumented people.
Springfield, Ohio isn't a sanctuary city. Nobody, Republican or Democrat, voted for this. So how did it happen?
Okay, looking at some comments here on Twitter, John Lefevre posts, the Biden administration has flown in over 320,000 unvetted Haitian immigrants into the United States and given them special protective status to protect them from being deported. The average IQ in Haiti is 78. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere with a GDP per capita of $1,748. It's the 20th most deadly country in the world with a 40.9 number of homicides per 100,000 people. Haiti's education system is ranked 177th globally. The literacy rate is 61%. I'm surprised the literacy rate is 61%. I didn't know it was that high. Has one of the highest prevalences of communicable diseases in the world, the highest STD and tuberculosis tuberculosis rates in the Western Hemisphere. 40% of Haitians practice voodoo. Haiti ranks lowest on the Human Development Index in the Americas. How exactly does this make our country better? Right. For a reminder, this is what Haiti looks like. Okay, it's a crime and disease-ridden hellhole covered in trash and raw sewage. And the Biden administration brought in over 320,000.
Also, starting with our administration, we gave TPS, temporary protected status, to Haitian migrants, 55,000. And then more recently, we extended temporary protected status to over 100,000 Haitian migrants for that very reason, that they need support, they need protection. That is why.
So the Haitians, on repeated occasions, murdered every single white resident of Haiti. All right, back to Curious Gazelle, Elliott Blatt from Saturday Night.
He's Catholic. He's like a practicing Catholic.
Well, there are so many Catholics who are not prudes, by the way. They will talk about sex non-stop, but he's like very old school then.
Yeah,
respectable, America, old values.
He is a boomer. He confessed to being a boomer, so
I like that. I respect that about him. But
I don't think Kevin is prudish.
Never really got into him. Like, I just found the duo. Yeah, they were kind of at odds with one another. But then I would need to revisit those streams and actually listen to what was being said, because I don't think I was that involved with Luke's stream back then.
Yeah, no, it was. There's a lot of people that it was a daily event. It was.
So I started talking to Curious Gazelle, I think in late 2020. I think it was during the first year of COVID.
And the thing about Luke's stream is it works well for me because it would be sort of at the times when I was done working and just wanted to relax. So it just worked well in that respect.
Even in terms of talking about sex, there are categories. Like, Luke likes to personalize it a lot. He wants to like weave in references from his life into the discussion, even if you're like talking about Trump's tax returns or something, and then he'll try and weave in, but my girlfriend back in the day was like this. And I think that would throw someone like Kevin Michael Grace off, because I'm sure he would totally talk about sex in a general sense. But then if you're like just doing personal anecdotes, and the other person, maybe Kevin Michael Grace hasn't had sex.
No, he has a couple of kids.
Oh, right,
His
okay.
kids, what's the city called? Edmonton or Alberta?
Okay, well, somewhere else in Canada.
Midwestern Canada, right?
Right.
And so he was going to go live with her. And
his
he did, so
daughter.
he moved out to Alberta, but somehow there was a misunderstanding, and he thought she had her own apartment, but she was living with roommates. So Kevin was like moved into this rooming house actually with his daughter, and he was still trying to stream. So he had found this little corner of his place, and he was always looking over his shoulder. I guess people were stealing his stuff. It was a really undignified moment for him, and he does like his dignity. But he would also be, according to Luke, he'd come on to the Luke show drunk.
But I feel sorry for people like that. I feel sorry for people like that. He's so old, and his children should be looking after him.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think he's since come into an inheritance. I think his money problems are over.
Right.
But
he's still got his PayPal up.
Oh, he does? Well,
yeah, in his bio, it's the KMG show will return soon on Rumble, the last Canadian you'll ever know, and then it just says pay.
Right. I don't think I've ever trashed any employer, because I feel like the employer-employee relationship feels sacred to me. It's so intimate, right? You're both working to make a buck, and I feel the same way about the co-host relationship. It feels sacred to me. Like, I felt like we were in the foxhole together and trying to create something compelling and important.
PayPal, no context, just PayPal.
No, I didn't follow him over. So, but that was when they split up, a big portion of the audience followed Kevin and abandoned Luke.
Oh, so I would do the opposite.
Well, right. And so
Kevin is a far better broadcaster than I am. He is far more compelling. He is far more intelligent than I am. And he just has a much stronger personality and a much clearer worldview. So it doesn't surprise me that 80% of my audience left me, so to speak, not that they were ever mine, but would feel much more comfortable with Kevin.
There was a rift, and it became clear who was on which team after after the breakup.
Does Luke call it a breakup or no?
Well, he doesn't use that specific word, but he's since tried to like invite Kevin back onto the show, but I think the feelings are too raw. Kevin sees it as himself.
So here's how I try to live my life. Don't always live up to this, but I try to live my life as though nothing is personal. So if Kevin and I stop working together and then start working together and then start working together, or Kevin has criticisms of this or that of my behavior, and believe me, there are plenty of things to criticize. All right, it's not something that I take personally. Right, I don't tend to get into feuds. I try to take the 10,000-foot perspective. And yeah, I'd absolutely be happy to have Kevin on the show again. The last few times I reached out to him, he didn't respond.
Having been fired by Luke. So Luke just thought it was, stylistic differences, and he meant nothing personal about it. But Kevin didn't see it that way. And so, I haven't seen Kevin show in a couple of years now.
Okay, so in terms of hosting partners, co-hosts,
I notice sometimes when people break up that they all start trashing each other to their respective friends. Ugh, that has almost never happened with me, but that would be so icky. It would be so trashy. God forbid that I ever get into that kind of self-destructive cycle. I remember when I was writing a column on the porn industry, and sometimes different porn couples would break up and then they start trashing each other, and I might go along with it and report on it for a while. But inevitably the woman would go low, so low that the man said, okay, I'm out. I'm not saying anything anymore. Women seem to know how to fight dirty in these things that men, it just makes them blanch.
Luke has had Kevin Michael Grace, Duvid. I guess, would you call yourself a co-host?
No,
or more of a guest?
No. So I'm not a co-host. I'm a frequent caller. Duvid used to call in much more frequently, but Kevin was only the ever proper co-host.
Okay, so no other co-hosts then?
No. After that experience, I think Luke just resolved to go solo because he just doesn't want to, compromise his. He wants to talk about what he wants to talk about, and he doesn't want to have to navigate other people's needs.
I am quite inflexible in way too many of my interactions. I would love to have another co-host, right? But it's not easy to find.
He has a very particular editorial posture that he wants to maintain, and I think just other people cramp his style. But he also needs other people to call in just to help carry the show along because it's.
I do think it's ironic how Luke Ford has adopted this religious worldview, and although he's not like an ultra-Orthodox Jew right now, he does sort of draw from Orthodox Judaism. So I find it ironic how, roughly speaking, he's sort of an Orthodox Jew, but at the same time he accepts all of these like modern psychiatric labels. The same with that person we were talking about in the previous space. Like, why do people who claim to be sort of anti-modernity to an extent, or they draw from Orthodox worldviews, they still love to accept these psychiatric labels like narcissism, borderline personality disorder?
Okay, most Orthodox Jews are not in love with psychiatry or psychology. For me, there are different labels and different perspectives that bring with them different levels of value. So on an overarching level, there's no one way of looking at life that is adequate from my perspective for the complexities of life, right? The Torah is not sufficient or adequate for understanding all the complexities of life. And psychology and Freudianism or cognitive behavioral therapy is not adequate for all the complexities of life. So I think there are some areas where a psychological prism is more useful, and other areas where a religious prism is more useful, other areas where a moral prism is more useful, other areas where an evolutionary prism is more useful. Sometimes a postmodern literary perspective is more useful. Sometimes a Chicago school free market economics perspective is more useful. The world's a frequently bewilderingly complicated place, right? There's no one overarching narrative from my perspective that is adequate to the complexities of what we face.
Luke Ford thinks that he has narcissism because narcissistic personality disorder because some psychiatrist has diagnosed him with that. And every single time I speak to Luke Ford, I don't let that go. I always say, well, you don't really have NPD, Luke. You don't really have it. Because he's far too empathetic. What do you think?
Well, yeah. So his whole situation within Orthodox Judaism is weird. He's a convert. He wasn't born into it, and he had a pretty difficult childhood, and he felt like an outsider in a lot of ways. And I think he was drawn to Judaism because he wanted to be part of like a tight knit community, and that's what Orthodox Judaism offers. And so I don't think it's a matter of belief as it's just a desire to belong to a tribe. You see what I mean?
I think he does follow it though.
Yeah, but you can be
It would be excruciating for me to belong to a tribe that had all sorts of requirements that I found excruciating. There was a tautology. All right. I feel very much at home and at ease in Orthodox Judaism and in the traditional Jewish way of life. So there were years where the theological and practical basis of Judaism was what mainly spoke to me. So sometimes there's the philosophy, the theology, the practice, various things are spoken to me at various stages of my Jewish journey. What I love about Judaism is there's so much there that if the theology angle is not really speaking to me, the practical angle is speaking to me, or the peoplehood angle is speaking to me, or just that most of my friends are within it, that speaks to me, or the geopolitical Israel angle is commanding my attention, or the literary angle, or the inspirational spiritual angle, or the moral angle. So there's so much in the history of Judaism that when one part of it starts to bore me, I can delve into another part. Also, I am able to discuss everything I want to discuss with some Orthodox Jew that I know, right? If I had to lead a secret life that I couldn't talk about with people within my Orthodox Jewish community, that would be excruciating. And you can tell by my relatively undefended attitude that I bring to these live streams. I think I come with an undefended attitude. I'm pretty open. I'm not trying to get you to believe X, Y, Z. I'm not trying to promote an image of myself just vastly at odds with reality. All right, I get to come to the show undefended every day because this show works with the rest of my life. It works with how I make money. It works with how I pray. It works with how I dance. It works with my social life. It works with the Orthodox synagogues that I attend, the Orthodox rabbis that I know, right? This is just one portion of my life, and I build my streaming around my life, right? I don't construct my life around my live streaming. My real life is more important to me than my live streams.
I think he genuinely believes in God.
Well, you can be a Jew and observe the rituals, but not necessarily.
I genuinely believe in God, but how important God is to me varies, right? And there are times where I find that an atheistic perspective on some things provides more clarity. Not that I ever fall into atheism, but I recognize the advantages of an evolutionary perspective, which is essentially usually an atheist perspective. All right, there are certain things that atheists tend to see more clearly than religious people. Sometimes I need new words for God because growing up as a Seventh-day Adventist, I heard so much about God from my theologian preacher daddy that I need new words. So I often substitute for God the word reality, right? I need new perspectives, new prisms, new ways of approaching things aside from traditional religious bromides that I've heard 1,000 or 10,000 times, right? Once I've heard a perspective 1,000 times, all right, it's highly unlikely to move me. I need a new perspective. I need something from 12-step or from poetry or from literature. I need something from evolutionary psychology. All right, I need something that's going to give me strength and energy and enthusiasm. Right, I just can't fall back on the words "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Right, I need something more than just ritualized Jewish prayers.
Necessarily believe them. It's sort of like a.
It's a ritual. I don't think he's a Claire core. She keeps telling me that you need to behave as if you believe, and that's the best way to get your belief back in Islam. And I thought, no, I just can't. I can't do that. But I don't think Luke is in that category. I think he genuinely.
And the chat says to be Orthodox Jew requires a belief in God. Yeah, probably if you're talking theory, but you can also find many contrary perspectives on what is God among the greatest rabbis of the Jewish tradition. You'll find teachings in the Jewish tradition where God is purported to say, better that the Jews abandon me, God, and keep my commandments than the other way around. And also, religion's not just theory, right? Religion is also how it's practiced. And there are a significant number of Orthodox Jews who have no belief in God. And some of them are Orthodox rabbis, and some of them teach in Orthodox Jewish day schools, right? Orthodox Jews don't tend to invoke God in casual conversation the way that evangelical Christians do, right? Judaism, Orthodox Judaism is primarily in real life a matter of practice, right? Orthodox Jews don't tend to sit around and discuss theology. Right? You don't get many theological discussions in Orthodox Judaism. You don't get many seminars about the theology of Orthodox Judaism, right? Even the religious teaching element of Orthodox Judaism is overwhelmingly about practice and not about belief. So if you simply keep quiet with your atheist perspective, all right, you're not going to get any pushback. You're not going to get a grilling. I've been in Jewish life since '94. I've primarily been in Orthodox Jewish life since 2000. And I don't think I've ever had anyone ask me if I believe in God. Yes, I believe in God. I've always believed in God since the fall of 1989. I had 3 years as an atheist between, say, 1985 and 89, 4 years. Other than that, I've always believed in God. But you don't get grilled about your religious beliefs in Orthodox Judaism.
Believes? What do you think?
I think he flickers. I think his belief is flickering. I don't think it's...
Do you think it's flickering now? Or it was flickering before? Or
I think it always has been. I think he's...
And the chat says, this is not an acceptable position to hold. You don't have to hold acceptable positions to make your way in Orthodox Judaism, right? There are very few people in Orthodox Judaism who are going to grill you about your theological beliefs, right? You're not accepted in an Orthodox Jewish community on the basis of the positions that you hold, right? You're accepted or not accepted on the basis of how you behave, right? There is far more focus on practice and behavior in Orthodox Judaism than there is on theology, right? Theology attracts almost zero attention in Orthodox Jewish life. You will find very few Saturday morning sermons from congregational rabbis that primarily focus on theology.
Right, like, I think he has like a broad belief in the divine, you know, but not necessarily the figure that's portrayed in the Old Testament. You know what I mean? Like, I think his belief is more New Age than it is Orthodox. So, you know, because I know,
I don't think my beliefs are more New Age than Orthodox. I would say my beliefs are Orthodox, and I've also received a great deal of wisdom from the 12-step direction.
You know, you're right. He's open to modern psychology. He's open to science. He's open to, like, David.
And rejoinder in the chat. My point is, if you walk into a shul and tell people that you practice Judaism, but you are an atheist, it will not go well. Well, first of all, it will depend on what shul. And second, if you go into a shul and speak truthfully about intimate parts of your life, it's not going to go well because people will think you're a weirdo. You're a freak. If you enter an Orthodox shul and go around telling people that you're an atheist or that you're really into a particular type of sex or that you have hated your wife for 7 years or that you love to cheat on your taxes or that you do this or that, you know, weird thing. All right, it's not going to go well. Yeah, if you inappropriately share things, it's not going to go well for you in any place. Has absolutely nothing to do with Orthodox Judaism. If you don't fit the energy, the vibe, the expectations of a place, it's not going to go well for you. Whether that's a dentist office, an Orthodox shul, a Buddhist temple, a sports bar, right? You don't abide by expectations, it's not going to go well for you. Has absolutely nothing to do with Orthodox Judaism. You behave like a freak in an Orthodox shul, and walking into an Orthodox shul and announcing you're not an atheist is a freaky thing to do. So you behave like a freak anywhere in life, it's not going to go well for you. Has nothing to do with Orthodox Judaism.
Theoretically doesn't, I think he doesn't believe that that the earth goes around the sun.
And chat says Orthodox Jews who don't believe in God are like Muslims who don't believe in the Quran and Christians who don't believe in Jesus. It's absolutely nothing like that, right? First of all, Orthodox Judaism isn't primarily a religion. It is a tribal identity. Belief in God does not command the same attention or the same relative importance in Orthodox Judaism as it does in Islam and Christianity, right? Orthodox Judaism is primarily a way of life of a particular people, and the idea that theological beliefs have just as much importance in Orthodox Judaism as they do in Orthodox Christianity or Orthodox Islam is completely removed from reality. I don't know why you want to believe that, but it has absolutely nothing to do with reality.
I can't believe the sun goes around the earth. Like there's, at least he used to anyway.
Duvid has more New Age beliefs than Luke, and that Duvid is a sort of Hindu Jew.
Duvid is just a strange guy going around.
No, it's like, you know, you don't judge a book by its cover, because, you know, Luke is the sort of, you know, Anglo, clean-shaven sort of guy there, and then Duvid is the guy with the beard and the darker features, and you would assume that Duvid is the more
okay.
orthodox one.
Let's
But Duvid's a
welcome
host of
Kip back to the
pagan sort of
show.
beliefs.
What's going on, Kip?
Hey, not too much, man. Just watching you. I was thinking tonight when I was watching your bit on Moldbug, he sounds less of a Valley Girl than he used to, doesn't he? You remember when he used to sound like a Valley Girl?
Not sure. I've never thought deeply about Moldbug. I probably listened to maybe 4 hours of his commentary in my life.
Right. The hallmark of Valley Girls back in the 80s was that they said like about every third or fourth word. And that seems to be on the comeback. And he used to be very bad about that the first time I had checked him out. And then something about him just seems juvenile. You know, something about him, I don't know if it's the silver spoon existence or something, but it's just seems childish, even though he's probably 40 years old. How old do you reckon he is?
In his 40s, but yeah, I would say silly. All right, he says a bunch of words and believes he's a deep theorizer, but it just seems so silly. That's my reaction. Right.
Yeah. It's sort of I'm smarter than you, just trust me sort of mentality.
Yes.
This is sort of where I think that it comes from. And I don't know, it got me thinking, we went from kids working in coal mines and factories only maybe 4 or 5 generations ago to like, by 2010, they had a boy on the front of the Easy Bake oven box. You get what I'm saying? What happened, Luke? What happened, Luke? We used to have, what would you call them? Rites of passage for men. And I guess there was a period where we were going to war like every so often or whatever. And then all of a sudden, like I told you, there's no political will for any direct war now. So maybe that has something to do with it. But am I barking up the wrong tree, or do you see a problem that's probably already been with us? With there's no test of manhood, there's no delineation. What do you say to any of this?
Yeah, our education system is overwhelmingly operated in a feminist manner. Usually competition is discouraged. You don't get teaching that usually appeals to boys or to young men. For example, you don't typically get classes in military strategy. So we have an educational establishment overwhelmingly that is not conducive to the best interests of males.
Yes. And I don't know if you feel like you're tired because we're getting to the later part of this show. Do you feel like doing a back and forth with me about the NFL?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, because it was 2020. Because I know you got a penchant for the NFL. And it was 2020 when Roger Goodell himself proclaimed that Black Lives Matter. You know, they've supported Pride and they've supported DEI for years. Why won't people demand the NFL change its values to reflect the average American that's, you know, consuming their product?
Well, what people primarily care about is the product, and so they're willing to put up with a bunch of gay drama to get the product.
I get you. But can we at least agree that the average football game is probably still a 3-hour affair, and it's really, Ted Kaczynski would call it, what would you say, something along the lines of a surrogate activity.
Yeah, it's a surrogate activity for war.
Right. But it's 2 hours. You're getting 2 hours of corporate programming for the 60 minutes of football that you really want. Is that a fair trade-off, Luke?
No, it's not 60 minutes of football. You get, I don't know what the ratio of advertising is, but I would think it's probably closer to 20%, perhaps 25% rather than.
Well, yeah, I was thinking the quarters were 15 minutes, so you have an hour's worth of actual ball, but the game takes 3 hours, you know what I mean? And seems like every 2 or 3 minutes they're queuing up commercials. There came a point in the NFL where there was a dude that wore a certain color hat or whatever that decided when they were going to commercials, and it dawned on me, he's the most important guy on the field apparently. So I don't know. I just
well, each play is incredibly significant, often, depending on how intense your fascination is with the game. And so the replay, understanding what just happened, and then understanding the situation and what the possibilities are, it's an excellent substitute for war. It's a type of a chess match. It can be incredibly intellectually demanding. It requires the same sort of skills that you need for a society in war. And so you don't get the opportunity to usually watch a war every week. So this is a male substitute for watching war preparation.
So it's war simulation, but at least for last couple of years, they had in the end zone, stop the hate, end the racism. Do they still have these ridiculous messages going on in their war simulation?
Well, in all of life, there are ridiculous messages. If you're married, you're going to get ridiculous messages from your wife. If you're a person who lives alone, you're going to constantly get ridiculous messages from your own psyche. There is no human possibility where you get to be free of ridiculous messages. So yes, the National Football League is part of the human condition. If you go to work, you're going to get ridiculous messages. You ride public transport, you're going to get ridiculous messages. You live alone, you're going to get ridiculous messages in your own head. You're going to get a different type of message at 2 a.m. than you'll get at 7 a.m., then you'll get at 11 a.m., then you'll get after having marijuana or before having marijuana or when you have alcohol or when you eat high carbs or when you have protein or when you read a book or you jump on Luke's stream or you listen to music or you watch a movie. All right, there's no thing, no space, no option in life where you get to be free and exempt from ridiculous messages. And yes, the National Football League is part of life.
Right. And then these end racism type messages that they keep trying to spray. I wonder, who are they virtue signaling to? Why do they do it? Does the end racism sign seem to make life better in the Black community? When joggers or non-joggers are polled in the past, they are the most racist of anyone in America. Do the crime stats also bolster this fact? But does the DEI and corporate virtue signaling help make the non-Blacks safer? You get what I'm saying? Are we any safer because of their virtue signaling? I guess is what I'm saying.
You're seizing on a signal, and you're outraged that it doesn't comport to a socially effective policy. But signaling is not about making a difference in the world, right? Signaling is what we do for our own advantage. So animals signal, plants signal, all forms of life signal, human beings signal too. You're signaling, I'm signaling, people on the left signal, people on the right signal. We don't restrain ourselves from signaling because it does not lead to a socially effective policy, right? We're all pursuing our own self-interest. People on the left are pursuing their interests. People on the right are pursuing their interests. And we don't limit the pursuit of our interests to that which is best for society. So you will use certain words, you will dress a certain way, you will act in a certain way because you want to send a certain message. It is impossible to live a life without signaling. And generally speaking, it's better to signal that you're a good person than a bad person.
Right. I don't know. I just, this is one of my frustrations with people. They don't share your values. You get what I'm saying? They couldn't be further away from your values when they're promoting their DEI and their, yes, we support pride and Black Lives Matter and all this stuff. And I don't know. I wish there was more people. I feel like I'm just a lone voice that says, screw these people. There's nobody willing to take my stand, and that sucks, On one hand, we're big college football fans here in the South, and sometimes I wonder what is the attraction of the NFL, because there's 8 or 9 college teams that have weekend games that they play in front of 100,000 people, and I don't know if the pro game could do that. So I don't know. I used to love college football because I thought it was more of a purist sport, but I'd be damned if University of Tennessee isn't paying their quarterback $8 million to play college football. Ain't that a bitch? You know what I mean? Nothing's going to remain pure. You get what I'm saying? Everything's going to be corrupted. There's no
anything that's human is going to be human. There's no purity is something that only exists outside of the human. So religion, science, news, media, sports, everything is going to be filled with corruption.
Right. You're right. Did you have any energy left to talk about pet peeves? You got any pet peeves that have bothered you lately?
Ooh, good question. So, pet peeves. I hated how low IQ people increasingly play audio from their phones in public when other people are around, right? Because they're not smart enough to use Bluetooth headphones. So, I just find that incredibly obnoxious.
Yeah, he used to always find it obnoxious that Black folks would always have their cameras set the wrong way. I don't know if it's portrait or landscape, but whichever way, theirs was always like long and thin and long and skinny, instead of using the whole view of the camera. But strangely enough, seems like as time goes on, they've done studies that most people like Luke that are using their cell phone are using it that direction. So if you notice now a lot more.
Well, YouTube makes the vertical the default, right? You have to go to a lot of bother now to live stream on YouTube in a horizontal mode. But because most people now watch YouTube on their cell phones, they make it the default to stream vertically.
And so in the end result, the way I used to laugh at the joggers and the way they would do their cameras, that turns out to be the way things are going, in much the same way that I used to get tickled every time I would see normal cars with 18-inch wheels on them, back when cars only had 14, 15-inch wheels on them. And now Toyota Camrys, some of them come right out of the factory with 18 or 19-inch wheels on them. So it's weird how the culture morphs right in front of your eyes like that. Do you notice that too as the years go by?
Certainly. One thing that grabbed my attention this afternoon, it just hit me. Different groups tend to carry their children very differently, and the different way the different groups carry their children differently reflects overall patterns. All right. So there are groups that have high investment in their children, and they take great care with how they carry their kids. Right. You could have an Orthodox Jewish mother essentially maneuvering 3 or 4 young children, even infants, and even with all the pressure of trying to corral all these infants, all right, she still takes great care. And then you have other groups who, let's just say, they don't take much care with the way that they hold their kid, and how easily they just belt their kid, just treat their kid like the kid has no value. So I live in a high investment parenting community. And it's just horrifying to me where I see how other groups treat their children as though they have no value. And it's all reflected in the way that they carry them.
Right. That is one thing about the Jews, let's say in general, that I can't appreciate, that they do have a mentality of whatever it takes. My kid is not going to school there. My kid's not going to be raised in that environment.
Yes.
And too many, I mean, I was a product of that. My kids, I mean, my parents, they didn't know, they didn't know what they were turning me loose into in that public school environment, because you remember, Luke, you and I were some of the very first to go through integrated schools. You get what I'm saying, Luke?
Well,
they were segregated before that.
Yeah, I mean, when did I get integration? I guess when I got to UCLA, but then it was overwhelmingly Asian. But I did notice that the Black and Latino students generally had GPAs that were 1 point lower than everyone else. So most of the white and Asian students who got into UCLA from high school had GPAs around 4.3. And I would meet Black and Latino students who would get into UCLA from high school with a GPA of 3. But other than that, I had overwhelmingly a white education until UCLA, which was then predominantly Asian.
Mm-hmm. Before we leave the pet peeves, I was going to mention a few of mine. And one is multi-level marketing schemes. Man, I think that makes my blood boil more than flat-chested women. It's like when somebody comes at me at a multi-level marketing scheme, I try to be nice about it at first, and I'll be like, well, if the product was so good, why is it on the shelves at Walmart, and just try to hit them with rational thoughts. And then it gets to a point pretty fast to where I'm like, okay, all right, you've asked, I've answered, I'm not interested. But if it goes any further, you going on with this multi-level marketing scheme, it could affect our friendship. You know what I mean? Because it never dawns on them that they were the sucker has already been had. You get what I'm saying? There's no business opportunity. You were the one that's already been gotten. And now, unbeknownst to you, you're trying to get somebody else, So I don't know, maybe I take that.
How much is it a reflection of you that people try to pitch you scams?
Well, I've only been pitched them once or twice, but the people that pitch them to you, they come so shallow. The last one I had pitched to me was something called Narc That Car. And he was trying to tell me that somebody gave a damn about me telling me marking down driver's license plates, 20 driver's license plates, and then saying where the locations were, and they were going to build a database, and it would help people like find stolen cars and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, this is bullshit. There's no there. There's nobody that would pay for this information. And I don't know, it got frustrating because they can't see through the thing. We've talked about it before. Who knows what the people of Utah would do without multi-level marketing schemes? It seems to be their number one export, but that is a pet peeve. That's probably my worst pet peeve. And the other one might be, we have so much superhero fanboy worship these days. Have you noticed it's just gotten crazy in the past 25 years?
I have zero interest in superhero movies and science fiction movies. Just don't. But superhero movies, nothing interests me about them. They're low IQ because as our average IQ drops in the population, you see it reflected in the moronic nature of movies and TV. Right.
What about the guy with 52 bumper stickers on the back of his car? What do you think about that fella?
Just someone who's needy for attention and someone who's working class. I mean, it's like someone who's got 52 tattoos, right? It's obviously someone who makes poor judgments.
Right. That's true. One thing, I guess I could probably close with this because you've been going for a while, but I was just going to say, you've probably noticed this the way the universe will test your morality from time to time. And with me in the past, a lot of times it came like with women that I wanted to like have relations with. And they would be the one that would like pass me a joint in front of their like 4-year-old kid or 5-year-old kid. And you know, I just can't go there, Luke. I'm a common man, but still, even I can't do that. There should be some separation between kids and adults when it comes to that. But there is millions of people that don't see that, and it's just weird how, you know, you're trying to walk a line. You know what I mean? You're trying to remain friendly with this person, or maybe you have relations with her, but at the same time, she's showing such a classless act. It's taking you down in so many different levels. But anyway,
right, because a classy woman generally wouldn't probably want to have relations with you or me. So we're getting the dregs. But let me ask you an unrelated question. One thing I really admire about you is that you can stand on your own 2 feet. I don't feel like I need to coddle you. I don't feel I need to hold back. I don't worry about, oh, how would this go over with Kip? You can stand on your own 2 feet, no matter what I say. So how long have you had that capability? Did you have that as a teenager? Did you develop it after your service in the United States military? When did you develop this ability that you can stand on your own 2 feet, and someone else can criticize you, and it doesn't make you insecure?
I don't know. My mom used to say, she used to be a big turn the other cheek person. And she would say, like, if that's the worst thing that happens to you today, you'll still be ahead in this world. You know, so, I mean, I could come home decapitated with my head in my hand, and I'd be like, it'll be okay, Mom. It can't get any worse than this. You know what I'm saying? So that was kind of built in from a young man. But I can tell you that my parents, my dad at least, he told me that nobody, or he maybe not said it, but in so many ways, I knew at a young age that nobody was really ever going to pay me enough, like what I was worth or whatever. And that was like standard business fare. I saw it at like in my first job after the Marines. So I had more of an entrepreneurial spirit than working for somebody, because at least in the world of entrepreneurialism, you can sink or swim on your own merits. But when you're working for somebody, you can only go as far as they're willing to let you go. So I don't know. On one hand, that doesn't sound like it would play into being an individual, but it really is, you know, being able to shake off. The other thing Mom used to say was shake it off like water off a duck's back. You ever heard that term, that expression?
Yeah. So this is one thing that would bug me about my father. So let's say I fall down and scrape my knee, and my father would grab my arm and just lift me up, yank me up if we were around other people. And then he'd announce to everyone else, he's okay. He's fine. Don't worry about it. It's like, I can't speak for myself. And like, I get yanked up, then he's fine. That bugged me. Then here's another pet peeve that I have. I don't like pompous self-righteousness masking ego, which I just frequently notice with my father. So my father would limit the things that he would say so that he wouldn't get into trouble with his church, because my father was the equivalent of a rock star in the Seventh-day Adventist church. But then the church did not publish his Sabbath school lesson plan. And so he went scorched earth, and he gave this public talk where he just destroyed the theological foundations of the church, right? After the church decided not to publish his Seventh-day Sabbath school lesson plan. So it was so obviously ego. And then he had this image that he was this brave truth teller, but there are all sorts of things that he wouldn't say that he believed, because they would then diminish his possibility of fundraising for his new religious organization that he set up. So using religion to cloak thrusting for ego, that's one of my pet peeves. I just get this knee-jerk loathing of people who clothe themselves in religion to advance their own pathetic and pathological self-interest.
Right. You said that was your dad that did that, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about your own, and the thing is, you talked about his ego, and I don't know, as a Buddhist type thinker, the ego, desires, and fear are the three things that must be transcended for you to be able to quiet your mind and go into the temple, to get that divine luminosity, the most brilliant light of being. So, he had something right off the bat that was precluding the whole thing. But it, like you say, it sounded like he had aspirations of, sounded like he was sort of famous, you know what I mean? And that might have got the best of him in the end result. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, we all grow towards the sun, and he grew towards the sun of attention, so that his favorite speaking opportunities were for funerals, because then people listened most carefully. So unless people were listening carefully, my father didn't really have generally much interest in human interaction, right? His idea of human interaction was him preaching and other people following what he had to say. And so at funerals, that's when he would get the most rapt attention. But by speaking out, he sabotaged his career with the church. And so he had to go from being a rock star in the Seventh-day Adventist Church to, instead of speaking to an audience of 1,000 people, he might be speaking to an audience of 15 people. And so after he fell out with the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1980, so at that point he would have been 51, right? His life became pretty lonely.
I was going to ask you if you feel like telling me in the end result, how much of your fatigue syndrome do you think was psychosomatic?
None, because once I took the beef organ capsules, it all went away.
Oh, fantastic, man. And you were like, where's this shit been all my life? You know what I mean? Yep. Didn't you say that was years you suffered with that?
Yeah. Years, virtually my entire life till 3 years ago. Chat says, is not the father bond sacred? And I would hope so, but I never had a father-son bond. So I envy those who did.
You told me you had a 2. You had your relationship with your father was a 2 on a 10 scale. I made a mental note of that so many weeks ago when you told me that. Can I? I'm going to run the risk here, but when your show started up tonight, I had my old rap music from the 80s playing in the background, and I sort of was able to morph a piece of that song to sort of a Luke Ford bumper music. I'll be the first to tell you, it's not going to really go well with the intro music that you crank up. But at the risk of making myself seem foolish, I'll play it for you. Maybe get you a smile.
No, okay? You can't play it because it'll be. I'll get a copyright violation.
I'm not playing anything. I rewrote a couple of. lines.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep,
so we'll do it. You have to use you have to mentally put in the music later. So we're actually picking up this song later in it, towards the end of the song. So it's gonna start. So united we stand, divided we fall. Luke's not the first, but he's still here, y'all. Luke's your best bet because you can't get a better show on your TV set. Luke's the one to call if you have requests. Luke's the one to call when you want the best. The one that'll hit you with a steady blast of clips from the present and jokes from the past. Hey, you never know what Luke's going to do next, so don't waste your time. Don't try to guess, because Luke's the one and only master of the ceremony, guaranteed to rock your house from here to California. What do you think?
Wow, I love it.
Doesn't really go with the bumper music you got right now, though, does it? I'll work on that. But you have a good night.
Take care, Kip. Thanks,
All right,
man.
buddy. Bye.
Good to talk to you, bro. Okay, I want to play. I think this is excellent from my favorite psychologist discovery.
The possible reason is that you're always very kind and you see the best in others to a fault. So this is when
that's not it. That's why do I attract the wrong friends? Where is it? This is it.
How does this actually work? How do people tell on themselves when they're being haters? Anytime a person gets disproportionately reactive about something, their shadow is getting triggered. Now, I've done videos on the shadow self. I have a whole playlist on Jungian.
Yeah, that's key. All right. When someone becomes disproportionately activated, right, that gives you an insight into their soul, right? It's just a quick, easy, immediate way to get a read on someone.
Psychology, so check it out if you're not familiar. The gist of it is that the shadow self is the personification of everything we reject about ourselves. If someone is choosing to be a bully and to be disproportionately harsh or emotional or angry or whatever it is, instead of respectfully expressing criticism, rest assured that it is because you have triggered their shadow self. Let me give you an example of like just overreaction that I experienced a long time ago that made me realize this is personal. So many, many moons ago, when I was in middle school, I think, I remember I was having lunch with a friend, and she was having like the kind of sushi that you like pick up at a cafeteria. I didn't like sushi at the time. It took me a long time to like it. So I remember looking at it, and because I had no tact, I had no social skills whatsoever back then, I told her that sushi didn't look very good to me. And I will never forget how reactive my friend got in that moment. She threw down her chopsticks, she had this deep sigh, and she was saying like, why would you say that to somebody when they're eating something? Obviously, this made a deep impression. I felt very ashamed of having said that thing. But it was strange because something about her reaction told me that I had touched on a sensitive spot. Maybe
Right. If you are able to be honest with yourself, right, you're going to read other people much more accurately. And then when they behave in ways that don't make sense, right, you recognize that they're either lying or they're self-deceived.
she didn't like that sushi that day. Because now, as a person who does like sushi, if someone were to walk up to me and say, that looks gross, I wouldn't throw down my chopsticks and start getting angry with them. I would just say, okay, that's your opinion. I like it.
What does it say about someone who doesn't seem to get phased at all? It means, in all likelihood, that they have some genetic predisposition towards being at ease. And it also indicates that they're at ease with reality and with themselves.
We only get triggered when someone touches on a sensitive spot. It's kind of like the difference between poking someone on healthy skin versus poking them on an open wound. Poking someone on healthy skin shouldn't cause such a big reaction, but when somebody has an open wound there, it hurts a lot more. They have a lot bigger of a reaction. In a lot of ways, when we trigger somebody's shadow self, we're touching on those wounds. We're seeing an overreaction that is disproportionate to the poke that we gave them. Editing on here, I actually just realized why my sushi comment created such a big reaction. The reason why this memory made such a deep impression on me was because I remember feeling deeply ashamed in that moment. And as I'll explain in a moment, the way people make you feel when they get triggered is how they actually feel in the moment. So when my friend made me feel ashamed of myself, it was her who really felt ashamed. And when I stopped to think about it, that friend actually went on to develop eating issues in the next few years, so it makes a lot of sense. She had a lot of shame around eating, and my comment inadvertently triggered that. And what do people with low self-awareness do when their shadow self gets triggered? Oftentimes they project. Let's say you're starting a new job, your coworker starts to act very unfriendly with you, and the reason she cites is that you seem unfriendly. She's projecting her unfriendliness onto you. In addition to projection, there's also something called projective identification, which is when you try to make the other person feel the way that you are feeling. So for instance, somebody feels abandoned by you, they try to make
Right. You usually sense what other people are feeling because it will usually infect you. All right. Just as we get morally infected, we get psychologically infected. Right. If someone does something morally upstanding, all right, that's going to have an influence on you and make you more likely to behave in an upstanding fashion. If someone does something that's morally degenerate, that will have some influence on you because our lives are not buffered. Right. Our lives are porous. Other people affect us.
You feel abandoned. Or maybe you're giving a presentation that you've worked on for 3 months and you've really researched, you're really proud of it, you feel like you know your shit and you're confident about it. And then maybe you hear one of your classmates say that you don't know what you're talking about. Why would they do this? Because you made them feel inferior and insecure about their own intellectual abilities. So now they want to make you feel that way. It's projective identification. Now, before we go any further, you might notice I'm in a new setting, I'm in a new home, new country. I actually have been on kind of a hiatus for a month, and you wouldn't really know a user-friendly, intuitive, easy-to-use interface. Maybe she should play on the men's team instead. What just happened here? Firstly, this person is being a hater, right? Like that's the first question we need to ask. Is this criticism or hate? This person is disrespectful. She's nitpicking something that cannot easily be fixed. I love the phrase, if somebody can't fix something in 10 minutes, don't comment on it. Maybe what she said doesn't even need to be fixed. Maybe it's not a problem. Maybe it actually helps you swim, or maybe it's not even true. So this is definitely a hater and not a piece of constructive criticism. How do you use this to your advantage? After you've identified that somebody is being a hater, you can use this as an opportunity to glean an insight into this person that they have no clue they just gave you. Knowledge is power, and bullies try to strip us of our power. It's ironic that by paying attention to what people bully us for and how they choose to bully us, they are empowering us. If you know how to analyze it correctly, you are actually being empowered. We're able to see sides of them that they are not even aware that they gave us, maybe not even aware that they have, and that can be a very helpful tool with which to equip yourself in the future. Pay very close attention to what this person chose to hate on you for, because that will give you a window into their shadow self. This person criticized you for not looking feminine enough. Make a mental note. Oh, this person really values femininity. Her shadow self is actually probably quite masculine. I'm willing to bet she's deeply insecure about her own femininity and deeply afraid that she will be perceived as masculine. Her femininity is probably very fragile. She's constantly worried that someone's going to take it away. So however this person is trying to make you feel, reverse it. That's how this person feels. If she had chosen to instead bully you about how you're a not good enough swimmer, there's a good chance that the insecurity there would be incompetence, that she herself feels incompetent in her life. So even if somebody's being a hater about the same exact thing, the content of how they're choosing to hate on you is very telling. It's a window into the shadow. It also might be worth worthwhile to ask yourself, what about this triggered this person? Does she feel threatened by you? Probably, but like in what way? What is it about this behavior in this moment that has made her feel threatened? Shifting the focus from you to her is a great way to detach from the situation. It's no longer, oh my God, what did I do wrong in the situation to deserve this? But rather, what can I learn about this person? Once you've gathered that insight, I find that the best approach is one that's very unbothered and almost like pokes fun at the fact that the other person got triggered. The best clapback that I've never actually had a chance to use with haters because I don't respond to haters is, oh dear, I guess I've hit a nerve. You can use this when someone's being disproportionately angry with you for something you've said, like an opinion that they disagree with, or when someone's getting really defensive over an innocuous thing that you said to them, or perceiving aggression in you when there was none. By saying this, you're showing that you're unbothered, unlike them. You're pointing out that they got triggered and overreacted, bringing attention to their insecurity, shifting the focus back on them. You're being a mirror, sort of reflecting it back. You're not absorbing it, you're reflecting. And yet still, you're not stooping to their level, you're not bullying or hating on them back. You're not engaging with them on what they tried to bully you about, you're just staying classy and calm. There are a lot of situations where people hate on me in what I do.
All right, I love this channel, and I thought she had some good